After my divorce, my daughter completely cut ties with me. It has been 8 long years since that painful separation from her mother, my ex-wife. Despite the years that have gone by, the memory still feels fresh. At the time of the divorce, my daughter was 20 years old, and without even bothering to understand my side of the situation, she chose to side with her mother. This choice felt like a profound loss for me. I tried to reach out to her multiple times, but she made it clear that she did not want to hear from me. The worst part was that I had no way to connect with her, as she had made her decision and had completely shut me out. During this difficult period, my ex-wife worked hard to ruin my reputation, which made it even harder for me to cope. I felt isolated and alone, as I didn't have any close family besides my mother, who was suffering from Alzheimer's disease. The emotional pain of losing my daughter was devastating, and it was one of the toughest experiences of my life. No matter how much I wanted to be a part of her life, it seemed impossible because she was an adult and had decided to distance herself from me. As time passed, I focused on caring for my mother and building my career. I ventured into a few casual relationships during this time, but I found it difficult to fully trust anyone after what I had been through with my divorce. Life became a routine of managing my responsibilities and grappling with my loneliness. Recently, after nearly a decade of silence, my daughter reached out to me. This unexpected contact brought a surge of emotions, as I felt hope and joy at the possibility of reconnecting. I had been mourning the loss of my mother just a few months prior, and that grief made her reaching out even more significant. The idea of rebuilding our relationship felt comforting. The call came from an unknown number, and when I picked up, I was surprised to hear a woman on the line. I had not spoken to her in so long that I didn't even recognize her voice at first. When she introduced herself as my daughter, I was shocked. She told me she had learned about my mother's passing through Facebook and wanted to check in on me. I was caught off guard but thankful for her thoughtfulness. It was heartwarming to know she had been keeping tabs on me online. During our conversation, I expressed how much I had missed her over the years, and we decided to meet in person over the weekend. The anticipation of seeing her again filled me with excitement. I wanted to cook her a dinner that she would enjoy, eager to reconnect after so many years apart. When the day came, I was both nervous and excited. When I opened the door, I hardly recognized her. Almost a decade had passed, and she had transformed from a little girl into a young woman. Initially, the conversation was a bit awkward, as we both navigated through the emotions of our first meeting in so long. However, as we talked, the tension eased. She shared details about her life and career, and I told her about my journey over the years. Eventually, we addressed the difficult topic of our past. I asked her why she had never considered my perspective during the divorce and why she had so firmly sided with her mother. I acknowledged that her mother had been more present at home since she was a stay-at-home mom while I worked long hours in construction. I had always tried my best to spend time with my daughter, but I knew that my absence during those years had its impact. As she began to respond, I hoped that this conversation could be the first step toward mending our broken relationship. I was optimistic that we could both come to terms with the past and move forward, finally creating a bond that had been lost for so long. My daughter expressed her feelings of regret about how our relationship had turned out. She admitted that she was too young to fully understand the situation, and she felt that she had been manipulated by her mother's words. Essentially, my ex-wife had painted a picture of me as the ultimate villain, someone who was self-centered and indifferent to everyone around him. Because my daughter never had the chance to hear my side of the story, she accepted everything her mother said without question. We talked for a while about these past issues, and things seemed to be progressing positively. However, eventually, she revealed the real reason for her visit. By that point, we had been in conversation for several hours. I asked her what prompted her to reach out to me after all these years of silence. She appeared a bit uneasy when I posed the question, so I reassured her that she could be honest with me. She finally admitted that she had been keeping tabs on my life through Facebook. When she learned about her grandmother's passing, she thought that lawyers would get in touch with her regarding her inheritance. When that didn't happen, she felt it was necessary to reach out to me directly. She explained that she wanted to give me space to grieve, but now that she had gotten engaged, she was in need of some financial assistance for her wedding expenses. Hearing this felt like a punch to the gut. After all these years of hoping for a reunion and a chance to rebuild our family, it suddenly seemed clear that she was primarily interested in money, not in reconnecting. I realized that her motivation might be rooted in the desire for her inheritance rather than a true wish to mend our relationship. Ironically, the inheritance in question was legally mine, not hers. Had she approached me differently and nurtured a better relationship, she might have found herself in a position to receive a significant portion of it. Throughout my life, money has never been my main concern. I live comfortably in my own house, I don't indulge in expensive hobbies, and I primarily shop for clothes at budget-friendly stores. If the inheritance had not been a factor, I would have willingly helped her out with her wedding expenses. However, her approach felt like an attempt to take advantage of my situation, which left me feeling hurt. Even with these thoughts swirling around in my head, I managed to keep my composure and asked her if that was the only reason she came to talk to me. She quickly grew defensive, asserting that the inheritance was secondary and that her true goal was to reconnect with me. She expressed deep regret for not reaching out while her grandmother was still alive, stating that she had wanted to contact me for years but lacked the courage, fearing I would never forgive her for being kicked out without an explanation. She also mentioned that she felt manipulated by her mother, but I could see the worry in her eyes, indicating that she might just be trying to smooth things over to gain my forgiveness. At that moment, I questioned whether she truly cared for me or was merely after the money. I asked her how she knew there would be an inheritance. She revealed that, years before the divorce, she had visited my late mother, who had expressed her wish for her only grandchild to inherit everything left by my father, who had passed away long ago. I understood why my mother would have told my daughter this, as at that time, my marriage was stable. If the divorce had never occurred, or if my daughter had not distanced herself from me after, the money would have likely been hers. However, knowing that her interest seemed to lie primarily in financial gain was devastating. I worked hard to hide my feelings at that moment, but internally, I felt crushed. I thought to myself that I needed to test her true intentions. I considered telling her that there was no inheritance. So, I asked her how much she expected to receive. Her guess was surprisingly decent, indicating that she had likely put some thought into this plan. I then told her that I was sorry to inform her that her grandmother had actually left everything to me years ago, and I intended to use that money to start my own business, which meant I couldn't assist her financially. In an effort to be fair, I offered to contribute a few $1,000s from my own funds for her wedding. I offered to give a few $1,000s of my own money to help with wedding expenses. When I made this offer, I expected it would be appreciated. However, the disappointment on her face was clear and cut deep, confirming my worst fears. She expressed gratitude for my offer, but as the only grandchild, she felt entitled to at least some portion of her inheritance, arguing that it was her grandmother's money I was offering. I explained to her that I truly wished I could do more to help, but my decision was final. There was nothing more I could offer if she was unhappy with the amount I was willing to give her. As we spoke, I noticed her face turning red, and anger began to boil over. She repeated her request for me to reconsider my decision, but I stood firm, insisting that I was sticking to what I believed was right. It was at this moment that she showed her true colors. Her next words confirmed all my doubts about her motives. She lashed out, saying that I would always be the selfish person her mother claimed I was, and she expressed relief that I was alone in life. I couldn't hide my disgust at her words. Although they stung, by then, I was somewhat prepared for her reaction. I had not expected her to be so brutally honest, so quickly. She began to speak again, but I interrupted her. I told her that I should have known she was just like her mother, that the only reason she would reach out to me was to ask for favors. I made it clear that trying to manipulate me by using my grief over my mother's death was despicable, even for someone like her. As she attempted to respond, I just laughed. I pointed out that if she hadn't blocked me years ago, she would have received my texts about her grandmother and could have been in line for most, if not all, of the inheritance. That statement had the desired effect. She looked completely baffled and asked what I meant. I told her to unblock me on that old number so I could resend the messages that were never delivered. Once she unblocked me, I forwarded all the texts where I had begged her to hear me out. I reminded her that I had even told her about her grandmother's Alzheimer's diagnosis and my wish for them to meet before her memory faded completely. This was very true. At the start of her illness, my mother often mentioned wanting to see her only grandchild, and I was heartbroken that I couldn't fulfill that wish. Now, this ungrateful child had the nerve to ask for a share of the inheritance. After reading all those messages, I will admit that she looked ashamed and offered an apology. However, she still insisted that it was obvious her grandmother would want her to have a share of the inheritance and that it wasn't fair for me to punish her. She claimed that she was young and didn't understand during the divorce, and if she had known better, she would have acted differently. In her apology, she expressed a genuine desire to rebuild our relationship. I told her that if money was the key factor in determining whether or not we had a relationship, then perhaps it would be better for us not to have one at all. I wanted to believe her when she spoke of rebuilding our relationship, but at that moment, I found it difficult to trust her. I told her I would consider giving our relationship another chance, but that the inheritance was off the table. She looked at me with pure hatred and stormed out of my house. I didn't try to stop her. Since that confrontation, I've spoken to several friends about what happened. Most of them agree that I made the right decision. However, one of my closest friends suggested that since I don't really care much about the money, I should just let my daughter have a part of it, especially if it meant maintaining family ties. While I don't agree with this idea, I haven't been able to shake it from my mind. Should I give my daughter part of my inheritance? After posting this, I received more responses than I anticipated. I appreciate all the advice and opinions shared. I want to express my gratitude for your advice and opinions. They have truly provided me with the perspective I needed to reflect on my situation. I suppose I should begin by addressing the most frequently asked question regarding what occurred during my divorce. It has been several years since I openly discussed it, but I feel that sharing my story may not cause any harm at this point. My wife and I were married for 23 years. Given that we had spent so many years together, I thought it was unimaginable that she would betray me, but she did. Although I prefer not to go into all the details, I discovered that she had been unfaithful to me with multiple men. This betrayal apparently had been ongoing for several years before I eventually found out. When the truth came to light, I was utterly devastated and didn't know how to confront her about it. In my confusion and pain, I turned to heavy drinking and started engaging in reckless behavior. This period of self-destructive choices nearly led to the ruin of my life. During this tumultuous time, I found myself fighting frequently with my wife. My struggles with alcohol made it all too easy for her to manipulate our daughter into siding with her. After nearly a year of living in this chaotic environment and being separated, my wife and I finally faced each other. This confrontation culminated in our divorce. My ex-wife, who had been a journalist and somewhat of a local celebrity, used her influence to tarnish my reputation, and she was nearly successful in doing so. Following the divorce, I faced a long and challenging road to recovery. It took a significant amount of time for me to quit drinking and reconstruct my life. Losing my daughter's support during this process was incredibly difficult and painful. I acknowledge that when I discovered my ex-wife's infidelities, I lost my sense of direction. I was not present for my daughter, even during the separation and in the year following the divorce. I kept to myself, struggling with my personal issues, and this caused me to miss out on being the parent my daughter needed at that time. However, once I managed to overcome my drinking problem and started to rebuild my life, my first priority was to reach out to my daughter and apologize for my absence and mistakes. Unfortunately, she refused to listen and blocked me on all platforms. I thought that giving her time would allow her to eventually reconsider, but now, 8 years later, our relationship has only deteriorated further. Another significant topic that frequently comes up is regarding my mother's inheritance. Technically, the inherited money belonged to my father. Both of my grandparents were doctors and invested in various properties throughout the city during their careers, most of which were rented out, generating substantial income. My father passed away when I was 21 and left everything to my mother. All of this wealth remained in her name throughout my marriage and for several years after my divorce, particularly while her health was still stable. After my mother passed away, I inherited everything as her sole heir. In our divorce settlement, my ex-wife did not receive any part of this inheritance. She only obtained alimony until she remarried a few years later, since everything was under my mother's name at the time. Now, my daughter has never had any claim to any of this property or wealth. She was aware that her grandmother owned several properties, including a couple of Airbnbs, but I never accessed any of that money. The earnings from my construction business were more than sufficient for a comfortable living. I hope this has answered your questions. As for my daughter, she has not reached out to me since that fateful night, and honestly, I don't think she will. It seems clear to me that her interest in our relationship may have been primarily linked to the inheritance. Now that that is no longer a possibility, I do not expect to see her again. Admittedly, I am upset about this situation, but I have learned not to hold on to high expectations from others, regardless of who they might be. In conclusion, I appreciate the support you all have extended to me. It may be time for me to put myself out there and consider dating again, to seek companionship rather than waiting for ghosts from my past to return. As for an update, this week has been quite eventful. Initially, I thought my previous post would be my last, but life had other plans. After returning home from work and contemplating a night out with friends, I was surprised by a sudden ring at the doorbell. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I opened the door, there she was, my worst nightmare. She had changed her hair and looked different. She has made some noticeable changes in her life, including a new hairstyle and a significant weight loss. When I first saw her, it took me a few seconds to recognize who she was. However, it's not easy to forget someone you shared decades with. Seeing her again was quite shocking, to say the least. I stood there for a moment, unsure of how to react or what to say, feeling a bit awkward in the situation. Then she surprised me by asking if I had a moment to discuss some matters with her. I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to engage in a conversation after all these years, but I didn't want her to linger at my doorstep. So, I invited her in. Once inside, the atmosphere was undeniably tense and awkward, as you can probably imagine. We tried to break the ice with some small talk, discussing mundane topics, but it felt forced. Eventually, she acknowledged that things were a bit strange between us and shared that she had some important things she needed to tell me. Curious, I prompted her to continue. She revealed that our daughter had reached out to her regarding the inheritance. I had anticipated this moment. It was clear why she would want to talk to me after so long. She admitted that the divorce had been really hard on me and confessed that she may have crossed lines she shouldn't have during that time. I scoffed at her remark, but she didn't seem to notice my reaction. Then she went on to say that I shouldn't hold any resentment towards our daughter for what had transpired between the two of us. Her words echoed what our daughter had said before, emphasizing how young she was during the divorce and suggesting I shouldn't be angry because our daughter chose to connect with her mother instead of me. I interrupted her at that point, making it clear that I had moved past any resentment. I reassured her that even if I felt any anger, it wouldn't be directed at our daughter. I expressed my hurt, explaining that after all these years, it stung to realize that the sole reason our daughter wanted to connect was due to the prospect of an inheritance. I conveyed the same sentiment to my daughter, that if she had tried to reconnect sooner, her efforts might have been rewarded more generously. My ex attempted to defend herself, but I firmly stated that my decision was final. I told her if we were going to keep going back and forth about the same issue, we would just waste each other's time. I expressed that I had other plans and, if there was nothing more to discuss, it was best for her to leave. She nodded and apologized for intruding, to which I replied it wasn't necessary. After she left, I remained seated in disbelief. I never imagined I would see her again, let alone host a conversation in my own home. The encounter stirred up a lot of old memories that I had hoped to forget, leaving me feeling unsettled. Later, I decided to go out with friends to distract myself and shake off the strange visit. It was something I needed to share because it weighed on my mind. If you're still with me, thank you for reading. Update 3, I have more to share. This afternoon, while at work, I received a call from my daughter. I considered letting it go to voicemail but ultimately gave in to my curiosity and answered. I immediately told her that if she was calling about the inheritance, I didn't see the point in having a conversation. However, she insisted she wanted to discuss something else. I prompted her to continue, and she expressed that she had been reflecting on everything that had happened. She felt she owed me an apology for how things had played out. She acknowledged that she should have approached things differently and offered an olive branch, inviting me to her wedding if I was willing to forgive her and restore our relationship. I was genuinely taken aback by her words. I asked her if she truly meant it, and she affirmed that she did, suggesting that I could take some time to think about it. After we hung up, I was flooded with mixed emotions. Part of me felt joy at the prospect of being invited to her wedding, but another part felt suspicious, fearing her intentions might be tied to securing the inheritance. If she is being sincere, I wouldn't want to ruin the chance to reconnect. But if I said no, would she ever reach out again? It was a lot to unpack, leaving me feeling confused and uncertain about what my next steps should be. I could hardly find fault with her feelings, considering the situation we're in. I would truly appreciate any advice from those who might be willing to lend a helping hand during this time. Just to update everyone on my situation, I have made the decision to attend the wedding. Many of you have suggested that going to the wedding wouldn't cause any harm, and I think that makes a lot of sense. After all, it's not as if I am obligated to do anything in return for the invitation I received to the event. To clarify, I want to emphasize that I am not part of the wedding party. I would simply be attending as a guest, and I am completely okay with that role. I understand that the transition from being someone she hasn't spoken to in 8 years to suddenly being someone who would walk her down the aisle is quite a significant leap for both of us. It's likely that neither of us would feel entirely comfortable with such a sudden change. My hope is that this occasion can mark the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship and that we can work together to build something meaningful from this point forward. I truly appreciate all of you for taking the time to listen to my thoughts and for the valuable advice you have shared. It means a lot to me, and I hope that you will wish me luck as I step into this new experience. Thank you all once again.